Your Silverado's oil filter might look exactly like the one your mechanic is about to put back on and still be the wrong one. Same can, same threads, same size on the shelf. Different bypass valve inside, and that difference is quietly connected to one of the most common and most expensive failures on General Motors' 5.3-liter V8 engine. I've been a mechanic for over 2 decades, and I want to walk you through the filter specification General Motors has now revised twice, why it matters so much on this specific engine, and how to make sure your shop actually knows the difference. A regular customer of mine brought his 2018 Silverado 1500 in about 8 months ago with a tick coming from the passenger side of the engine and a check engine light that had come and gone twice. He had 92,000 miles, a full service history from a quick lube chain, and he swore he had never missed an oil change. I pulled the code P0300, a random misfire, and immediately suspected what I always suspect on these trucks first: a collapsed active fuel management lifter. When I got the valve covers off, I found exactly that: a stuck lifter on cylinder 7 with debris packed into the tiny oil feed ports of the valve lifter oil manifold. Before I quoted the repair, I asked to see his last few oil change receipts. Sure enough, the quick lube had been installing an AC Delco PF48 filter every single time. That truck was supposed to run a PF63E. Same can size, same thread pitch, completely different internal bypass valve, and that mismatch had been quietly starving his lifters of clean oil for years. Here is what most owners, and frankly a lot of techs, do not know about this engine family. Starting with the 2012 model year, General Motors redesigned how its small block and V6 oil pumps regulate pressure. Older engines controlled pressure right at the pump outlet. The newer design used across the small block Generation 5 family that includes the 5.3-liter L83, L82, L84, and L86 Ecotec 3 V8 engines regulates off main gallery feedback instead. In plain terms, the pump does not settle into its normal pressure control until oil has actually reached the main gallery deep inside the engine, which is what feeds your bearings and your lifters. That change was made specifically to get oil to the lifters faster during cold starts, which matters even more on these engines because of active fuel management and later dynamic fuel management, both of which depend on precise oil pressure to switch cylinders on and off through tiny hydraulic locking pins inside each lifter. For that system to work correctly, the filter feeding it has to hold up to a specific pressure before it opens its internal bypass valve. That is where the two filters that look nearly identical on a parts shelf come in. The AC Delco PF48 and PF48E were built for the older style engines and open their bypass valve at around 15 pounds per square inch. The correct filter for these newer engines, the AC Delco PF64 or PF63E, does not open its bypass until 22 pounds per square inch. That 7-pound difference sounds small until you understand what the bypass valve is actually there for. When a filter starts to clog, or when oil is thick and cold and struggling to flow through the media, the bypass valve opens as a safety measure so the engine does not starve for oil entirely. The trade-off is that anything that opens the bypass lets unfiltered oil straight through, debris and all, and it heads directly into your bearings and your lifter oil galleries. On an engine that regulates off main gallery pressure and runs delicate switching lifters with locking pins the width of a pencil lead, a filter that opens its bypass at the wrong pressure means dirty oil reaching exactly the parts that can least tolerate it. GM first put this in writing in a service bulletin back in May of 2017, numbered 17 NA 157, warning technicians in plain language that installing a filter with a bypass rating of 15 pounds per square inch or less on these engines allows debris to circulate and can cause bearing and valvetrain damage, leading to premature engine failure. Here is the part most owners never hear about. GM did not just publish that once and move on. The bulletin got revised in February of 2022 to expand coverage to the 2020 through 2022 model years, and revised again in September of 2023 to add the 2023 and 2024 model years, along with an additional engine code. Two revisions on the same warning, years apart, because the mix-up kept happening across an ever-growing list of engine families. By the most recent version, the bulletin covers dozens of RPO codes spanning the small block Gen 5 V8 engines, the high-feature Vi6, and several four-cylinder applications, which tells you this was never a small, isolated parts counter mistake. It was a persistent industry-wide confusion that GM kept having to correct in writing. If this kind of detail is saving you a future repair bill, take a second and subscribe, because I break down exactly this kind of overlooked maintenance detail every week, the stuff that never makes it onto a service reminder sticker. Why does this mix-up keep happening in the first place? Walk into any parts store and pull a PF48 off the shelf next to a PF63E, and unless you are specifically looking at the bypass spec printed in the fine print of the catalog, they are close enough in size and shape that a tech grabbing filters by muscle memory can easily install the wrong one, especially on an older platform they have serviced for years under the assumption that nothing changed. Quick lube chains are particularly prone to this because their systems often default to whatever filter was used last on a given vehicle in their database, and if that database was never updated after your specific engine crossed into the newer oil pump control category, you can end up getting the same wrong filter installed at every single visit without anyone catching it. I have pulled PF48 filters off 5.3-liter trucks that were 3, 4, 5 visits into a pattern of the wrong part number, and every single one of those trucks had oil pressure readings that looked fine on a basic dash gauge, because a dash gauge cannot tell you your bypass valve is opening under load and letting contaminated oil straight through. The symptoms this produces line up almost exactly with what gets blamed on AFM and DFM lifter failure in general, which is part of why this root cause gets missed so often. A tick or knock that comes and goes, worse on cold starts, a misfire code, usually P0300, or a cylinder-specific code, especially on the same bank repeatedly. Occasionally a low oil pressure warning or message, particularly during hard acceleration when the pump is trying to push more volume through a system that a wrong spec filter is quietly bypassing. Most shops jump straight to condemning the lifters and the valve lifter oil manifold, and to be fair, that is very often where the actual damage has already occurred by the time you notice symptoms. But if nobody checks what filter has actually been going on that engine for the last several oil changes, you can replace every lifter in the bank and still be feeding fresh damage into the new parts with the same wrong filter next time around. Checking this yourself takes about 2 minutes. Find your engine's RPO code, which is usually on a service parts identification label, inside the glove box, on the driver's door jamb, or under the center console, depending on your model year. If you see L83, L84, L86, L8B, L8T, LC8, LFA, or any of the other small block Gen 5 codes covered under this bulletin, or if you are driving a high-feature V6, your engine needs the 150 kilopascals, 22 pounds per square inch bypass filter, meaning a PF63E, PF64, or an aftermarket filter explicitly rated to that same 22 pounds per square inch specification with equivalent media and burst strength. Do not assume a lower-priced aftermarket filter automatically matches. GM's bulletin is specific that any substitute has to match the bypass set point, not just the physical dimensions, and plenty of budget filters on store shelves are built to older, lower bypass specifications because they are manufactured to fit a broad range of applications rather than your specific engine's requirements. If your last oil change receipt lists a part number, look it up before your next service and hand your shop the correct spec rather than assuming they already have it flagged in their system. The customer with the stuck lifter I mentioned earlier ended up needing both the passenger side lifters and the valve lifter oil manifold replaced, a repair that ran him just under $2,400 out of pocket since his warranty had expired a year before. We also swapped every oil change from that point forward to the correct PF63E, and 8 months later that truck has not thrown a single misfire code. That is the frustrating part of this whole story. The fix costs nothing extra at the parts counter. A PF63E is not meaningfully more expensive than a PF48. The only cost is knowing which one your specific engine actually requires and making sure whoever is turning the wrench on your truck knows it too. If you want to see the deeper breakdown on how AFM and DFM lifter failures actually happen inside these engines and what an oil change interval realistically needs to look like to protect them, I have a full video covering exactly that right here. Check your RPO code, check your last oil change receipt, and make sure the filter going back on your 5.3 is the one your engine was actually built to run. Like this video if it helped you catch something before it became a repair bill. Subscribe for more of these deep dives every week. Drive safe, take care of your truck, and it will take care of you.